Hey there, I'm Matt Brynildson, Brewmaster of Firestone Walker Brewing Company in Paso Robles, California. And I'm here today representing Hop Growers of America, and we're gonna have some fun going through hop selection. First of all, I'll start with just the basics, maybe we'll call it pro tips, related to how to prepare yourself for selection. You know, it's serious business, as much fun as it is, so it's important that you prepare yourself. Simple things like staying hydrated. Don't wear a lot of perfumes or any kind of colognes. This is a sensory experience, so it's very important that your hands are cleaned. Take a shower in the morning, get ready for it. Wear some clean clothes, don't wear what you wore on the farm. I think it's really important to bring a group. You can do selection solo, no problem. But certainly if you brought some of your brewers with you, some of your co-workers, especially those on your team who have already been trained in sensory, beer sensory basics apply to hops. And we're gonna go through all of that. If, in the perfect case, you can have an odd number of people on your selection team, that really helps with the final voting. So there are a few basics, whether you're looking at pellet hops, whether you're looking at whole leaf samples like I have here on the table. Some of the things that are just 101 that you need to pay attention to when assessing hops. First of all, I would say, we're gonna try to identify the variety of hops that we're looking at. In this case, we have some Chinook hops. Hopefully you have some familiarity with that variety, but oftentimes you're looking at a new variety. And so there's a ton of online resources. Most hop merchants supply books or other resources that will give you the basics on a variety, what you should expect. In addition to that, most samples, whether it's your box of hops in your brewery, or in the case of this brewer's cut sample, there are some numbers, and you see there's a lot ID number here, and in this particular case, it has a 3-digit number followed by a dash and an additional group of numbers. That's gonna help you identify that specific lot associated with that variety coming from that specific merchant. And in this case, we have 323, that's a grower number, so that's specific to the farm that those hops came from, followed by 013, which is the particular lot code associated with that variety coming off of that farm. So those are really important numbers to capture. That's part of the data capture piece that is gonna be critical to following this up year after year. I always suggest that back at the brewery, when you're brewing, don't just write on your brewer sheet, I used 5-10 pounds of Chinook. It's really nice to capture off of the box whatever data has been given to you. That should follow through your whole recipe process. And then you can always go back. You taste something a little bit strange in your beer that's not true to type or true to brand. Now you've captured exactly where those hops came from, and you can track that back with your merchant. Another nice piece to have, especially when you're going to selection, say during harvest time to select lots, is some type of a form that you've kind of gone through and everyone in your group can fill out that kind of clues you in on some of the data points. For instance, color, texture, some of the key aroma. I guess at the end of the day, it's just important to take good notes and capture that data for future use. So now we're gonna get into kind of the nitty-gritty, into the actual selection of hops. And I have here in front of me a brewer's cut. So right away, before I even open it, I can kind of take a look at what we're getting into here. I'll take some notes on what I see, specifically if I see anything off. But do remember that selecting hops is not a beauty contest. What this is really all about is the quality of the aroma and trying to get the best character out of these hops. So don't be too misled if you see some yellowing or some browning. We'll get into that when we open up the sample. So we're gonna open up this brewer's cut, and what this is, it's basically a core sample from a 200-pound bale. This is a really healthy, nice size sample, so this would be plenty for a group to really get into and for you to maybe even save some after the fact, for later evaluation. I'm gonna open it up, and right away what I like to do is just kind of feel a little bit what's going on here and get a smell of that sample before I've even really done anything to it. I'm gonna move this aside here. And I'm just gonna get into it. I'm gonna dig out a nice, healthy piece of this core sample. And I have it here. I can kind of spread it out on the table, so it's nice to have kind of a clean area. Some cases you can lay a piece of paper down if it's a wood table. Here we have this really nice metal table, no problem. So I'm taking a look at this sample and I'm just kind of doing an overview. I'm seeing whole cones. I'm not seeing a lot of shattered cones. I'm not seeing a lot of dust or the evidence of shattering of the hops. So this is a really nice, bright, good example of hops. And I like to, and I kind of learned this from Ken Grossman at Sierra Nevada, because they use a lot of whole hops. So he's used to feeling and touching hops. Is, the basic feel of this, is it feeling moist or is it feeling too dry? If you crunch it, you can almost hear and feel if it's too dry. And that might be, a sign of over-kilning, something that might have done some damage to hops. Next, I've felt the hops. I've determined that, moisture is probably pretty good here. This is looking pretty consistent. And now we're gonna get into it. And the hop rub is something that, is the critical kind of start of the sensory piece. And I'm just rubbing this in my hands. The heat of my hands is starting to warm up the lupulin glands, and that's the whole idea, is to rupture that lupulin. And I'm making kind of a little pile of shredded hops here. You're gonna make a mess, so don't worry about it. And already I can start to smell the essential oils, the terpenes, the thiols, the oil of the hop coming forward already. And I'm rubbing to try to disrupt or to break up these hops as much as I possibly can. And then, just kind of take a little pass over. You don't have to get too deep in there at first. Are you smelling pleasant smells, pleasant aromas? Are you getting true to type? And I'm gonna take kind of, a few little sniffs, get it in there. If anything's off at all, ammonia type aromas, is it smell too much like alfalfa or hay? Little things like that you'll clue into. You can write those down in your notebook. I'm gonna start getting in there a little bit more. And now I'm gonna start taking some real inventory of the aromas I'm smelling. You kind of develop a lexicon of sorts, citrus being a bit of a broad category. But try to describe that citrus. Is it grapefruit? Is it lemon peel? Is it lime zest? What's good is do that by yourself. This is kind of an activity for just you, your notebook, and these hops. Let anybody else who's assessing this hop do it on their own, and try not to influence what other people are experiencing. So, try to keep the table talk low at this point. I'm gonna take some notes. Your pen's gonna get real sticky. Your notebook's gonna get real yellow. Your hands should be beautifully, if you haven't gotten into it like this, you're not doing it right. So there you go. So we've done the basics of assessing quality. We've looked at the visual, we've felt the hops, we've got the textural type of condition of the hops, and then we did a rub where we really got into the aroma and doing our best to describe that aroma in the context of the variety that we're looking at. If we have, say, a few varieties and we have a group in the room, we're gonna move from these samples. Everyone's gonna take their notes by themselves, and doing our best to try to get between samples. In this case, I'm working with a really oily and really kind of amazingly intense hop. I may need to stop and wash my hands between samples. The hop resin's a little bit difficult to get off your hands. Things that work really well are ethanol. Of course, a lot of denatured ethanol does have an aroma itself, so you may want to wash your hands with a neutral soap and water afterwards, get them nice and dry, and come back. Make sure that you're not smelling the soap between, that's not interfering. But in general, you're gonna get a lot of resin on your hands, so that's part of the process. Once we've collected our information on the lots on the table, now we can start to discuss what's going on here. And I think the most important thing is first to eliminate hops that are not true to type or have some off character that wouldn't agree with you or your beers. And you can have that discussion around the table, and it's almost like a process of elimination. You know, these two samples weren't exactly true to type or aren't the kind of Chinooks that I'm looking for my beer. We can move them off the table. And we can kind of limit it down to the best hops on the table. It's a little bit like judging beer. This can be subjective, and again, that's why it's nice to have an odd number of people around the table so we have a chance to kind of vote on this. And we'll go around and we'll just decide which was my favorite, what was my number 2, what was my number 3, and all the reasons why. Take note of intensity. Depending on the type of beer you're making. If you're making an IPA, you're probably looking for a particularly intense hop. Am I looking at lager hops? Am I looking at Willamette, for instance, and I'm looking for a balanced, round character? You know, these are things that we talk about at the table and kind of get it down, this process of elimination, to the best hops for us on that table. That may not be the best hop for the other brewers who are gonna come in after you and do selection, but that's okay. It's all about the best hops for you and your brewery. So once we've completed the sensory part of our selection, that's the time to look at the analytics. We can get a lab report from the merchant specific to that lot, and we can look through to make sure, once again, that those analytics are true to type. We're looking at alpha, we're looking at beta, we're looking at percent oil. We can look even deeper at specific oils if we think there's something very particular about that variety that's important to our brewery. At the end of the day, it's consistency. It's getting familiar with the sensory part of selecting hops and then looking at the analytics to make sure that it tracks well for what we need in our brewery. Okay, so we've really gone through all the steps of assessing a whole leaf sample. But of course, most of us throughout the year are working from processed hops, from pellet hops. This same basic concept can be applied to your pellet hops as well. One handy tool for grinding pellets into a powder so that we can assess them would be this pellet grinder. This is just one example of one. You could use a pestle and mortar, but the idea is that you really want to break those pellets up. And I will mention that you should take note of the condition of those pellets as well. Were those pellets rock hard? Were they soft and broke up easily? Were they case hardened or looked like they were somehow heat damaged on the outside? So again, that visual assessment, rubbing, crushing the material so you can get at the lupulin glands and really assess the aroma quality of those hops. All right, so we've gone through this process of analyzing a hop sample and taking some notes, capturing the data. Remember that you want to log that data somewhere, so when you come back the next year for selection, or you do that selection at your brewery, or you're looking at these lots, that you can go back and get that data and it means something and it connects all the dots. Critical piece, but we know that as brewers that brewing logs are a really important part of our business. You know, I highly suggest, I think every brewer should come to the hop growing regions at some point in your career to see the magic of harvest and to have this experience of assessing hop quality right at the site. You can always ask for those samples to be sent to your brewery, however, and to do that at home. So remember, you know, it's a lot of fun. You know, it's you don't need to stress. There's never just a hard and fast right or wrong. And the more you do this, the more you will feel comfortable and get to know your hops. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's this kind of repetitive exercise to get to know our raw materials, to know what works best in our beer, and at the end of the day, get the best hops we possibly can in our breweries. So thanks so much for your time. I hope that was helpful for you and helped guide you. And until we see each other next time, cheers.